I know it's hard, but I want you to imagine yourself standing in your garden next spring, asking yourself, what do I need to do to get this place ready to put some plants in the ground? You've got seeds and seedlings waiting to go in the ground, but you're starting to see an army of weeds emerging from the unmulched soil. And then there's the question in the back of your mind, are pests just gonna destroy my garden right when I put it in like they did last year? Now, I want you to imagine that you have a plan. In fact, you've had a plan all along. You've been ready months in advance for a bomb season, and that is exactly what I want to help you with right now. This is everything that you need to do right now to have a killer and stress-free spring harvest. Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor, and while I've been gardening for years now, one of the main areas that I get hung up with for gardening is in the planning, the preparation process. I've learned over the years that fall is a crucial time. And the reason for that is that it's kind of like meal prep. You have got tons of stuff to do in the spring. Spring is planting season. You don't want to be worrying about weeds as much as possible. Of course, you're going to have some. You don't want to be worried about how you're going to deal with the pests that come. You don't want to worry about, is my soil properly amended or not? You just want to have all that stuff set up in advance. And you could do it in the winter, but a lot of winter is seed starting. We're doing winter sowing, we're doing sowing indoors to get stuff ready. And so fall is really an incredible time to get started on a lot of that. So I mentioned that I'm not great at planning, but I have kind of created 3 buckets that all of the preparation activities can go into. It's easy to get paralyzed with so much to do, but these 3 buckets really help simplify it for me. And it's really simple. They are collecting, bed prep, and amendments. Collecting, bed prep, and amendments. And one bonus before we hop into it, this one I wouldn't forget about or wouldn't underestimate, is just a general yard cleanup. We're talking about aesthetics here. You actually can't underestimate the value for yourself of walking into a clean yard that is well put together. If it looks nice, it looks like everything's kind of in place. The leaves are raked. In fact, maybe the whole yard needs a general rake because there's pine cones or acorns in our case. Or you actually just want to do a lot of the work in advance to make your yard look like a nice place. Don't underestimate that for actually just the psychology of getting out in the yard. If it's a nice place to be, you'll be there. So for the first bucket that I really consider when I'm preparing myself for next growing season is collecting. And this is a lot of stuff. This is collecting or saving seeds from plants. We do this every year at some level. We've gotten better through the years. Some years we've done it more than others. Collecting seeds is one of the joys of gardening. I mean, you can technically just kind of buy seeds once and then save your seeds from your plants that grow. It's pretty different for every different plant, exactly how you save those seeds. We'll have videos in the future. We've got some right now on how to do that, but seed saving and tuber saving is an incredible activity that you really want to do now so that you can just be ready in advance in the spring. Cassidy saved a bunch of dahlia tubers this season, and some of them survived, some of them actually got destroyed by our kids. Whoops. Left them outside and they thought that they were play buckets. We will have some. It's kind of nice to just get those stored in advance. They are a little bit particular in the way that you store them, so you can check out our video on how exactly to do that. Other things to save, we've covered this recently, is your leaves that fall from the trees. This is just free mulch, free compost, carbon material. Leaves break down over time into really good soil. And so absolutely be collecting your leaves. There's all sorts of other things, like for us right now, I mentioned we've got acorns, and I'm just collecting acorns right now so that I can make actually an IMO, or indigenous microorganisms 3 out of them for next season. And these are just kind of the natural things that are appearing on my property. They're gonna really naturally integrate into our garden. Those are a few of the things that we're collecting. We're also making sure to hit up local arborists and neighbors for bags of leaves. We just recently got a huge dump load of leaves from our neighbor's landscaper. They dumped a couple trailer loads right by our compost heap. So really grateful for that. But you're just doing a lot of collecting. So you can just ask yourself, okay, what do I need to collect that's in my yard right now? And gather it, make it look nice, keep it in a contained area. That's going to really help. Of course, you'll also want to be collecting other plant debris. These are the green like stalks and stems and leaves and stuff from your garden. If things have recently died, then you can use those as a good nitrogen source in your compost, or you can do a chop and drop. That actually brings us really nicely into our second bucket, which is bed prep. And this is one of the easiest ones to not do because you just spent an entire season pulling stuff out of the beds, and it's easy to forget that you actually have to put nutrients back in. You don't want to necessarily be dousing your beds with fertilizers and necessarily like overwhelming them with nutrients, but this is the time to put down some organic mulches, take the tarps off, and put down some nice carbon material. So we are, as I mentioned, we're collecting the leaves that fell in our yard, and we're just putting those right on the beds in a lot of cases. So fallen leaves are an amazing mulch because you can just put them on your bed. Along with everything else, they will freeze in the winter cold, and then they'll thaw, and then they'll freeze and thaw, and that process helps to slowly break them down. A leaf mold is a really good component of healthy bed soil. This is kind of an easy way to prepare your beds in advance. Of course, in the spring, you can then just come and move the leaves aside and plop your plant starts in your bed. Leaves will also, if you put enough down, they will act as a natural weed mat. And this is extremely beneficial because weeding is like one of the last things that I want to do in the spring. Of course, it's going to happen. You're never going to avoid weeds completely, but you can kind of get ahead of it now by just putting leaves or other carbon materials really thickly on your bed. Of course, this is also the time to put compost down. Put compost below the leaves, actually. If your compost is only partially broken down, no problem. Because again, that process of freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing will help break it down really quickly. And so this is a great time to get partially composted compost. Doesn't have to be fully finished. You could put manure down, especially if it's kind of been heated up already. That'll help the process a little bit of decomposition, but manure is a great one to put down. What I would strongly suggest is that you take off any plastic tarps for the winter. If you use tarps to mulch or to kill weeds, I would take those off because they're not, like, weeds aren't going to sprout in the winter. And so you're kind of just exposing your tarps to the elements unnecessarily. If you want, you can bring those back in the spring, and they're really efficient at killing weeds. For the winter and fall months, I would recommend putting some organic mulch on the beds. Of course, I'm always going to recommend that you apply a small amount of IMO, indigenous microorganisms. This is an incredible amendment that we'll get into how to make a little bit in the amendments bucket. But IMO, if you can just get a little bit into your soil, keep in mind that while the top layers of the soil will freeze, if you go below the soil even a couple inches, that soil stays pretty consistent temperatures. It probably gets down to 45 degrees at the coldest. And so you can test your soil in the dead of winter if you want to make sure, but usually it's just the first inch or two that is really, really cold and affected. Basically what I'm saying is the microbes from indigenous microorganisms can survive at the lower depths of your soil. So do your soil a favor, get those microbes going, and your plant roots will have plenty of nutrient deliverers come spring. Now, if you don't have compost or you're struggling to find leaves and whatnot, and you've got but you had a ton of organic matter left from your plants, you can absolutely just do what's called a chop and drop, which that just means you cut the plant right at the base of the stalk or the stem, and you leave the roots fully in the ground, and then you might want to cut up the plant a little bit, but you can lay it over the top of the bed. I want to get really specific here. Make sure, if you're going for a no-till approach, make sure that you cut the plant and don't pull out the roots. You want to just cut it right at the base so that the roots can stay in there, because those roots have done a lot of work to aerate your soil, make it not compact. But if you pull up the roots, then that organic matter that is food for microbes gets taken out. So that's your chop and drop. If you can cut up the plant a little bit more, it'll decompose. And this is a really efficient way of re-imparting the nutrients that your plant took out of the soil in the growing season. You're just putting it back. In the Jadam organic farming kind of mentality, this is exactly what you should do. If you grew tomatoes in a certain bed, you should just chop and drop the tomato crop residue, put it right back on the bed, and then grow tomatoes there the following year, and your tomatoes will actually just do better. We found this totally to be the case. The more consistently we grow the same plant in the same area, the microbes and the nutrients adapt to be exactly what that plant needs. So, and this actually is kind of getting us into the third bucket, which is your amendments. Now, gardening amendments, you can of course buy most of these from the store in some form. They are, in my opinion, the store-bought amendments that you can buy are nothing compared to the homemade amendments that you can buy. There's of course exceptions to this probably. You can probably get really high quality amendments somewhere, or you can buy worm castings or buy really high quality compost. But there is just a real ability that you have to make your own. And so that's what I want to go over right now. Compost is the most basic garden amendment that every gardener should be making at all times, really, and fall is no exception. Get a compost pile going. It doesn't even have to be a hot compost pile. It can stay cold, and through all the processes that I already mentioned of freezing and thawing, that compost will have months to age. You can use it as a top dressing in the spring. This is just overall really good for imparting organic matter and microbes and nutrients and all of that to your soil. I would say if you can get a hot compost pile going, if you balance your carbons and your nitrogens equal parts and you pile it up 3 feet high, at least 3 feet wide, your pile will go thermophilic. You of course need to get the moisture and oxygen ratios all correct. We've got another video on that explains that in detail. But if you get your pile rocking higher temperatures like 130, 140, 150, then the decomposition process speeds up drastically. And what you can do is you can actually create finished compost in a matter of months or sooner. The reason that you might want to do that is to save some money in the winter when you're starting to make your own potting mix, which we would recommend. It's very easy to make your own potting mix through a little bit of trial and error, and so compost is one of the main ingredients in potting mixes. If you want to make your own potting mix, make hot compost now, harvest it and sift it in the winter. Of course, things like charcoal or biochar is really favorable to make that right now because it's colder. You know, maybe the burn ban gets lifted and whatnot. It's more reasonable for you to have a little small burn pit in your backyard. We like to make this every year because we go through it a lot. We put it into all of our compost, but charcoal is a great thing to make right now. And then you've got your liquid amendments. These are things like in the Korean natural farming sphere, we've got things like OHN, Oriental Herbal Nutrient. We've got LABs, FPJs, or fermented plant juice, other natural fertilizers like Jadam liquid fertilizers, mineral extracts. Don't forget about your mineral extracts. You can soak some bones in vinegar all winter long and have a really nice water-soluble calcium supplement for your plants. So if you get these ready in advance, then you don't run to your garden, putting plants in the ground and then say, I need to make some mineral extract. You've actually just got it ready. I'm gonna say for us, one thing that we are certain that we're gonna get prepared in advance this season is our suite of Jadam natural pesticides. This is a really cool method for mitigating plant disease and pest pressure in a way that is completely harmless to the soil microbes, to the environment. There's really nothing sketchy about this. It's a very incredible process, at least from my point of view. These amendments include the Jadam herbal solution, the Jadam sulfur, and the Jadam wetting agent. And if you combine those three components, you make Jadam natural pesticide. Now, a quick note on Jadam. This is an offshoot of Korean natural farming. You may be familiar with it. If you're not, we've got plenty of videos on that, and we'll be coming out with a video just explaining all about what Jadam is. But this method was developed by the son of the inventor of Korean natural farming, or at least the propagator of Korean natural farming. His name is Youngsung Cho, and he invented and developed some incredible ways to make these natural pesticides. The wetting agent is kind of the glue that holds the different components together. You can actually use a lot of liquid amendments just combined with the wetting agent. This helps all of the amendments stick on the plant, and the wetting agent itself deters pests. If you make something like OHN or like a plant fertilizer in with the wetting agent, It will actually help the plant absorb more of the nutrients because it stays on longer. And the wetting agent itself, the surfactant, doesn't damage anything. It's completely water soluble, so you might need to apply it multiple times if it rains or if you're watering heavily. But these are the things that you don't want to be making the same week that you're seeing your plants getting destroyed by pests. You want to have them ready in advance, and you want to just even have them basically as a general maintenance. You want to have them prepared so that you can be spraying your plants with nutrients and pesticides long before they need them. The last amendment that we're making is our IMO. We've already talked about collecting IMO, but basically we're putting a box of cooked rice in a forest, and we're culturing it with the indigenous microorganisms that are in that area. We take that home, we preserve it with brown sugar, and this makes IMO 2. That is a shelf-stable amendment that you can store indefinitely. Well, maybe you can store that for up to a year or a couple years, and then you can use IMO 2 to make IMO 3, which is another shelf-stable IMO amendment. This stuff is just amazing for your soil. It is filled with the most robust microbes in your area. And microbes, there's so many reasons why microbes are really important and essential for your soil. One of the reasons is that they act as nutrient deliverers. And so if you've got a bunch of nutrients deep in your soil, sometimes your plant roots won't be able to actually get deep enough to find them. But if you've got a soil that's saturated with microbes, they will actually retrieve the nutrients that are deep in the soil, and they are attracted by root exudates. They go find the root and they do a little exchange. The microbes give some nutrients, the root exudates give these carbohydrates or the sugars, small sugars, to the microbes, and everyone's happy. It's an incredible system. IMO is the way to put the strongest and most resilient microbes into your soil. And so we're making IMO 3 well in advance so that we just have it ready and we can start, because you kind of want to apply it little by little into your garden. You don't want to just overwhelm everything because it won't necessarily know what to do with it all at once. So those are all the amendments. There's probably many more that you could do, but I want to encourage you to get some of them going. If you've never made any of these amendments, start with compost. Just get a compost pile going, mix some green material with some brown materials and cover it, make a big pile, water it down and cover it, let it sit. That's going to be great. If you have compost already going, then maybe you want to start on a natural fertilizer. This is a really simple method. You're just throwing plant debris in a bucket with some leaf mold soil and water. You can check out our videos on that. If you are already familiar with some of these, maybe try some of the more advanced liquid amendments like OHN. This one is perfect to do over the winter because it takes several months to fully make. So start it now. I know all of this can sound a little bit overwhelming, so we have created a playlist with actually all of the amendments that I'm talking about. This is just a playlist, a general kind of fall garden prep playlist that you can check out our videos on. These are the videos that are basically explaining everything that I'm talking about in this video. So make sure you check that out, and we'll see you in the next video.